Focus of today, impact of the trials at home recommendation for DCTs. We had some discussions this morning. This is really an opportunity to dive even deeper. Mira already said, I'm Helga Garðarsdóttir. I'm here together with my co-moderator, Megan. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words.
No, I think you all know Megan Heath. Is this working? It is working. It's just taking a second or two to kick in.
All right, let me see. We'll just jump right in, have enough for the conversation. We have 4 experts here that are going to talk about their perspectives, and I'm happy to introduce them. We have Monique Aal from the Dutch Central Committee on Research Involving Human Subjects and the Clinical Trial Coordination Group. We have Maria Duterte, European Patients Academy on Therapeutic Innovation, EUPATI, Martien Delinger-Kramer from European CRO Federation, and Martin Johnson from FutureMeds, representing the site network perspective. And maybe if we click on the next, we can tell you a bit more about what they will be.
Yeah, so we're, as Mira already suggested, we're very much moving from an internal perspective from trials at home to a perspective from the external stakeholders to say, okay, what do you see from trials at home, and what are the opportunities? So we asked our panelists to prepare for 3 questions. They will each do a short presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. But the 3 questions were, what have we learned, and what do you see as key opportunities? What did we miss? Because there may be future opportunities for us to continue research. And what surprised you most from our trials at home learnings? And we have, as Helga's already said, 4 panelists. They'll give you a different perspective. So Monique will focus on addressing some of the multi-country DCT implementation. We have Maria with a very much a patient perspective and course materials and patient insights. Martien will very kindly focus on a little bit more exploration of the regulatory landscape and some pediatric focus. And then lastly, but not least at the end, we have Martin, who is actually one of our chief investigators in the UK and giving us a very strong site perspective and a broader view of DCTs. And with that, I think I'll hand over to Monique, so feel free.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and congratulations to you and all your team by the tremendous work you have been doing. And I just realized when you read those questions about learning, opportunities, and I thought, I only have what have we learned. I think we are still in the learning phase, so maybe don't look at my top slide then, because only what have we learned. Yep. So I also looked when the trials at home started, because I was a little bit forgotten when it was, and I noticed it was just shortly before COVID came around the corner. And when COVID was really there was not a question anymore to the patient or to a potential trial participant, do you want to travel? Well, we were not allowed to travel. So with this prerequisite of not to travel, or at least as minimal as possible, but to have the conduct of clinical trials still continuing, especially if it was concerned trials investigating new medicines for life-threatening diseases or with unmet medical need. We came up with lots of regulatory flexibility. And I think we were really flexible, having in mind what the aim was for these clinical trials. And then towards the end of COVID, people thought, okay, so there is a lot of things possible. What can we do now when we are back to our normal life? And it was also the time where it triggered within the European Medicine and Regulatory Network that we should give some guidances. And those guidances were, of course, not related anymore to COVID, but what is our current regulatory framework. We initiated initially this project by CTCG, but it was rather fast taking up within the ACT-EU initiative, because that started also at the same time. And the great thing was, by having it in ACT-EU, that we had a broad stakeholder involvement as well. External stakeholders and internal within the players in the whole life cycle of a clinical trial. So we had also inspectors on board. Of course, we had people from the NCAs, the regulators on board, but also from ethics committee and external. We had representatives from pharma, from the academic part, investigators. And of course, we had representatives from different patient organizations. And I have to say, it was a very, 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 very nice project, sitting together and come up with a little bit a more harmonized approach how to deal with decentralized elements in clinical trials. So finally, in December 2022, we published a paper. It was general recommendation where we could harmonize, and there were some items which it was fragmented in Europe, and we want to make that transparent in the national provision overview. We thought also that it was a big step forward to a more harmonized approach within the European Union, and that we could also build on best practices. And I made something in red, updated as knowledge and experience evolve. And I already heard today, this morning, the DCT paper should be updated. Well, good news. It's my last slide, because when I was drafting the slides, it was not yet published. But it is now published. Yesterday, it's published on Euderlex Volume 10. And I will tell you a little bit more about it. It's especially on the national provision overview. So, okay. So what have we learned? What, as I said, I think Trials at Home did tremendous work. You presented and analyzed the opportunities and challenges in conducting clinical trials with decentralized elements in a structured way. And then this is really what I like about it. Science, to investigate science, you could say, or new designs, innovative designs. It was focused on elements which could have a significant impact on the validity, the data integrity, benefit-risk ratio, or the protection of trial participants. You have lots of publications on site selection, IMP shipment, the technology, which already was discussed this morning, digitalization, recruitment and informed consent procedures, and also the trial activities at trial participants' home. I went through your website, which is also a bulk of information, but you can see very interesting reports, guidances, recommendations, and really a helpful tool. So, okay, now we have all of this, and you did do a lot, but we as regulators or as ethicists or whatever, we haven't really seen a lot of uptake of decentralized elements in clinical trial. It's rather slow. Most trials are still rather traditional. And we didn't expect that at the time when we're drafting this recommendation paper. So why is it? I think there are lots of challenges. Challenges in adopting innovative design elements. And sometimes I think it's also really a gap between regulatory guidances, recommendations, and operationalization. Okay, I hardly can pronounce that word, but you can read it. Of decentralized elements in clinical trials. So I picked up one article from you, Helge, and your team. And that's about the regulatory interaction. And I made something, highlighted something which you put in the conclusion of this paper. And that is early and continuous regulatory engagement is essential for successful implementation of innovative trial designs. And I think that's really key in all what we are discussing today. There are many opportunities already today for scientific and regulatory advice at EMA, but also at the national agencies. And recently we had a pilot running at the CCMO, also for national advice, also on ethical aspects within a clinical trial. And we have also 2 pilots running within the ACT-EU initiatives. One is the CCG, pre-CTA advice, a very fast procedure to get regulatory advice. And the other pilot, which is running within the ACT-EU initiative, is the pilot on the combination of the scientific advices done by the Scientific Advice Working Party and the involvement of the assessors by the Clinical Trial Coordination Group. So use of decentralized elements may be an open door, but I think it's an important one. It should be fit for purpose, and you have to have a risk-based approach. And then what we also have learned from regulatory side, that transparency and regulatory interaction with member states may contribute to less regulatory fragmentation. And that was also seen by our national provision overview. If we take the IMP shipment column in this national provision overview, it was rather red, meaning it's not hardly, never in any country in the EU possible. And that led to internal discussions at the country level. And there are several member states are in the process of adapting the law, of have already adapting and adopted their law. It's a long process always if you have to change your law, but at least that was be triggered. And I think this is one of the examples which I think that this interaction has been really valuable. And you can see in the updated national provision overview for which countries there has been a change. Finally, I want to make a note about cross-border trials, a very short one. It's also in the update of the DCT recommendation paper, because sometimes cross-border trials and clinical trials with decentralized elements are mixed. There are, of course, in cross-border trials decentralized elements, but it's not completely the same. So we make a notice that if you have a cross-border trial with decentralized elements, please contact the national contact point of the country which is affected by these cross-border trials to find out what are the regulatory requirements in that country. And this was my final slide, and thank you.
Thank you, Monique. As Megan said, we would like to take all the questions at the end, so we want to have first our speakers. Thank you, Monique. I'm really happy. I see I just got a quick win, because this morning this was my quick win, so my day is already perfect. And I will ask Maria to come up and let me see. So, and then just the green button. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So my name is Maria Dutart, and I come from the EUPATI, European Patients Academy on Therapeutic Innovation. I am a guest passenger on this train today, and I'm very happy to have been invited here. I have seen this Trials at Home train over the years, passing by. I've been following your progress from afar, but now I'm very happy to be joining this celebration and also hearing more about your recommendations and your work. So EUPATI is a non-profit organization today. We were established as an IMI project 13 years ago. So we were also once a consortium, a 5-year project. And our activity is based on the belief that patients' unique experience, these insights are valuable. And these are as valuable as all of the input that all other experts, all other stakeholders bring to the medicines R&D process. And involving patients in medicines R&D benefits everyone, so benefits all other stakeholders. We have today proof that patient involvement ensures that relevant research priorities and methods are there from the outset. It also improves clinical trial recruitment and retention, and results in therapies and health interventions that really focus on the unmet needs. And we are getting better also on proving that and showcasing the return on investment in patient involvement. So EUPATI is really focusing on the educational needs, the role of education and information in patient involvement. So we were built as a training academy to facilitate and enhance patient involvement. So we train patients about the entire life cycle of medicines R&D, how research works, and what researchers do. But we also train researchers about what it means to do meaningful patient involvement. And we believe that patient involvement needs to be systematic, not ad hoc, not tokenistic, but systematic and done as early as possible throughout the entire life cycle. This is our patient involvement roadmap that can be found on our website. And as you can see, we have mapped out the entire process and the different endpoints where patients can provide input. So clinical research is, of course, a key part of our curriculum. So all the training materials also that we provide and the trainings are based on this roadmap. And what we had also identified is that it is important to teach patients about the different types of trials as well. And we had this gap in our curriculum around decentralized clinical trials. So when we saw your train passing by and we heard, oh, you are also developing training materials, we were, of course, interested. And today we are very happy to be a dissemination partner, and my colleague is actually uploading the course materials also on our website, on our open classroom as we speak. So the takeaways that I was asked to think about are here. First of all, we heard already this morning very strong examples of the patient involvement that happened in the project itself. And you know about this. We had the patient expert panel and also the patient organizations that have been partners in the consortium. And I think this shows a very strong example. And I would ask you to share this experience and the best practices you have developed, so that not every IMI or IHI project or collaboration need to kind of figure it out again from scratch. And I was happy to hear that there is a paper being developed around these outputs as well. And so I think we are becoming to understanding that patient involvement is a methodology, is a method, it's a science, and there is the best way to do it, and there are also bad examples. So we are building on these good experiences as we go, and so Upati is also committed to sort of teaching that further in future consortia, but also bringing together research communities to learn from these experiences. Secondly, I wanted to bring up a few elements I noticed in the recommendations. So I think they are very strong. They have very strong focus on the patient preferences, which I'm really glad to see. And there are some really strong wordings there. So congratulations on that perspective. And I also see that patients have a key role in the recruitment, especially in the communications. I noticed lay language being recommended. And here I think patients and patient communities can be part of that process, translating the language of researchers to the language of patient communities, and being the link also there. I think patient communities, the strength is sometimes underestimated, how they are can be helpful in the process of research. And then thirdly, I want to mention the training course, which I think is really valuable, a wonderful capturing the essence of decentralized clinical trials for patients. It's really addressed to patient communities, and it's very unique. So we're very happy to disseminate that. I want to end on a question to all of you that I would like to challenge the research communities, and it's about the impact, how to measure impact of patient involvement. We are all aligned that it should happen systematically. We are doing a lot in training and education already, and patient communities are interested in being part of research and are doing so in growing numbers. But are we seeing the impact? Do we have the numbers? Do we have the data to showcase how effectful it is? What is the impact of it in the end? So that's maybe for further discussion, but I would like to invite all of you to be part of this research effort going forward, to be able to also show that in your publications. Thank you.
So as we move on to Martin, so far we've got open dialogue with the regulators, and we've got standardization but not mandating patient input in clinical trials and in research. And Martin, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thanks to Twice at Home for being able to participate to this very exceptional event. And I also had the privilege to be a member of the external stakeholder platform. And congratulations to what Trials at Home has achieved. So what have we learned from this Trials at Home project? We learned that DCTs can improve accessibility, representativeness, and data quality. DCT trials, they reduce the geographic and logistical barrier, which makes the trial more accessible to a broader range of patients, and those traditionally underserved populations are really favored by DCTs, such as children, older adults, or patients affected by rare diseases. This is very important. Can you imagine children going to a site? They are very stressed, or older patients as well, they are very stressed. And then when you do the measurement, these measurements do not reflect reality. Or if you have a child who has to do a 6 minutes walk test, has traveled the whole morning, the result is not reflecting the reality. And so DCTs would help to solve those kind of issues. Wearable, mobile apps, and remote monitoring tools, they enable to have a continuous measurement, real-time data capture, and this enhances the quality, the richness, and the reliability of the data. The technology that we will be using for DCTs must be validated, user-friendly, interoperable across the different hardwares that we use, and mentioned this morning also of the differences. And the systems must be compatible. And we should also try to set them up in a way to not create additional burden for the participants, the patients, and also the sites. Maybe to look into having more guidance documents in the future, to develop some guidance documents. In order for a trial to run smoothly, it's important to provide clear guidance, instructions for all digital tools and procedures. And we learned from Trials at Home that to set up a help desk or support interface would be very valuable. It's not the role of the site to explain technology issues to the participants, also not the role of the monitor. So a help desk would be very welcome in these conditions. A successful DCT implies patient-centric approach. DCTs prioritize patient convenience and engagement. They foster trust and improve the overall trial experience. The patient often prefer DCTs, and this has been shown this morning as well. But we should not add complexity and put much more burden on the patients so that the advantage is lost. And each DCT needs to be, we need to approach each DCT in a different way to really focus on it. Can we do what we want to do in all the countries that we involve? This needs to be clarified right at the beginning. And otherwise, we will have a disharmonized trial. We also need to look at the accessibility of the patients. Do they have the technical tools? Do we have the technical tools in those countries? Patient and caregiver preference should also be integrated into the study, and this from the beginning, and especially when the involvement of the patient is becoming so important. And for that, it's important to engage patients or patient representatives early on, from the beginning, from the start of your design of the study, to check whether this will be feasible. And to maintain a continuous communication with the patient through different tools, but really to keep them informed and to provide them regular update on the trial. Not that they have to see in the internet that the trial is on hold, for example, or delayed. So keep the continuous information to the patient. DCTs, or what Trials at Home has been doing, has already influenced the way of doing DCTs. the recommendation from Trials at Home influence how sponsors, regulators, and also the sites approached DCTs. In terms of protocol design, sponsors are now adapting mainly hybrid models that combine remote visits, home sampling, digital endpoints, and they really look also into engaging the patients. For the regulatory strategy, it is very important that there is an early dialogue with regulators, and Trials at Home for the radial trials have had these discussions. What is addressed mainly is data integrity and patient safety. But it's also advisable that you have joint meetings with the EMA and the HTA bodies, this joint scientific advice, because your trial must be accepted by the regulators, but also by the HTA bodies. Regarding the infrastructure, CROs and trial sites, they are upgrading technologies and logistic capabilities to support remote operations and to ensure that the DCTs is running in a smooth way. So Trials at Home findings are already informing EU-level initiatives such as ACT-EU, which aim to modernize clinical trials in Europe and to harmonize. And I would like to give you one example of a case study where a DCT would have really simplified and make it more easy to go through the journey of the patient and also the family. It is Lucia. She is a 10-year-old girl from Barcelona. She was completely normal, a friendly girl until the age of 4, and then her behavior has changed. She became less friendly. Some people said she became rude. Parents realized that something is wrong. At the age of 8, she was diagnosed with neuronal cerebroid lipofuscin stenosis, CLN5 variant. This disease is called the Batten disease. It's a genetic, ultra-rare disease, neurodegenerative disease. And there is no cure for this and no treatment. So there was one trial worldwide with a site in New York and a site in London. Lucia went a few times to London to be pre-screened, and she was finally accepted to enroll in the trial. So parents were very happy. But in order to participate to this trial and to get the treatment, the whole family had to move to the UK for 8 months. This meant to find new schools for Lucia and also her brother, and to learn a different language, different culture. They had challenges times, and nobody around, no family, no friend. When they came back to Barcelona, some of the tests had to be redone again because there was no sharing about the outcomes of the results. So incorporating DCT's element could have significantly reduced the burden on Lucia and her family, allowing them to navigate through this very difficult time in a much easier way. So what you do at Trials at Home is so important, and I hope that there is a follow-up to even improve this, to make the life of children and families easier so that they can access the treatment that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. A very powerful message indeed when you bring it back to the real patient. So thank you for that. And now finally, Martin.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to this wonderful event, a wonderful setting. For those that don't realise it, it's actually just a month after the 200th anniversary of the foundation of the railways, so I think it's a great place to celebrate this trial. I represent the clinical sites here, which is always related to in clinical trials, unfortunately. This is a long-standing problem. This is not just related to DCT. It's something I've been asking for 40 years. Please involve clinical trialists in actually the design of the clinical trials, and it never happens, unfortunately. So it's great that the patients are now, or participants are now meant to call them, are getting their way, but unfortunately the trialists never do. I'm actually a patient in a DCT trial as well, and that's working extremely well. Because I'm always difficult, I've been doing it too many years. Which button do I press? That one, thank you. So I am the UK Medical Director of Future Meds, so we have 30 sites across Europe. We have 7 sites in the UK. I oversee all of them, but I still do some CI, PI, and sub-investigator work within the clinical trials. And I was the UK CI for the second half of the trial, so I wasn't there when it was being set up. What we did, because my particular site actually didn't do any of the DCT part, we looked at general recommendations, because nearly every trial I do at the moment has got an element of DCT in it. So I went around a lot of my investigators and sub-investigators and said, what recommendations would you give? And this is what we came up with, apart from the first one, which is very specific to radial. Almost, you'll see on the second thing, it was hopeless. It really was. I spent so much time to poor Danny over there actually talking about the technology. We've heard all about it, all the issues. And I always remember 2 of the patients that we had in. There was an older gentleman who actually was an engineer by training. He couldn't work it. And then the last patient we brought in had just completed a master's in computer science, and he couldn't get the things to work either. So we almost gave up. Fundamentally, we did also have issues recruiting patients to this study, or participants, because nobody's actually realised that actually patients, once they're on insulin, they don't like it touching. They really do not like it touching unless they see a huge potential benefit in terms of their own diabetes. And that's something we must remember for future trials. The next 2 things, issues with oversight, management of contracted home teams, and also clarification of PI oversight. I think that is often about information flow, which we've heard. Sometimes all we need to do is you have a quick meeting, and actually you can do a lot rather than just rely on technology. I love technology. I really do love technology, but I'm going to sound off about it during my talk. I think also flexibility of protocols is so important. We have far too many data points in modern day protocols. They are so complex. Eligibility criteria, which obviously are fundamental to bringing patients into clinical trials, they've doubled in the last 20 years in the average protocol. Why? Well, most people say it's due to the fact that junior medics who are designing some of these protocols within sponsor companies actually are just doing copy and paste. So it just makes it so much more difficult, and we really do need to look at that. So what was missed altogether? Well, I like to look at money. I mean, that's always important. But I think there is an assumption by some regulators, and certainly within the UK, the HRA set the regulations for this, that if you have a home, you're seen at home as a participant, you don't need any compensation. Well, why not? You might have taken the day out to actually sit at home. So lack of stipend payments, I think, is very fundamental for this. And certainly 2 of my sites have a lot of interest in diversity because of the areas where they work in. But actually, even in ethnicity diversity, actually the main problem is socioeconomic diversity, which actually means that people particularly drop out of studies because they just can't afford to be in a 5-year cardiovascular outcomes trial. Now, this is my biggest bugbear, the next point. The average clinical trial across Europe and the States has between 9 to 15 logins on websites required. I have at the moment 154 logins on my computer, which are just for work. You spend all your time training for logins, and the sponsor comes to the setup meeting and they go, oh, we've got this new system. We all go, oh, God. Oh. Because you have to then do it. And then they, as PI, they insist that you train on it, even though you're never going to use it ever. So I think fundamentally we need to look at the adaptability that certainly R3 regulations have actually brought to the table, but nobody's looked at the practicality of it. But I think more seriously, certainly I know from a UK perspective, and I'd be interested to see if this has happened anywhere else in Europe, these logins have also caused a significant problem. Because if you look at key opinion leaders who are being asked to be CI or PI, they don't want to do them because they don't have time to do all the rest of the stuff that they're asked to do. They just want to be medical doctors and actually advise about the patients and the trials, rather than taking all the PI responsibility that you need to do and all the work that these logins causes. So I think somehow, somewhere, we need to look at this process, because the only way we're getting them back is to actually bring these people who would normally be CIs and actually advise about the conduct of the study in as like a medical consultant, and we're actually going to start delegating them sort of back to front almost. And this is something we've talked to the MHRA and the HRA about. So flexibility of regulatory approvals, this needs to be built into every single protocol, whether you're going to use it or not, because you need this flexibility. We've heard all about giving the patients the choice, which is fantastic. Sites the choice, you never know whether there's going to be a hurricane, there's going to be a pandemic, whatever the cause is, or just a train strike. Anything could happen, which means you suddenly have to change it, and actually you find that you have to change all the study schedule. So actually the fact that you've got flexibility within the protocol to actually do home visits as required would be a great advantage. And also, don't forget, participants do like to attend normal clinics. I'm going to try and get a balance here, because they like to do the shopping at the same time and get it paid for under travel expenses. There's also all the practical aspects of home working, you know, dogs being bitten and things like that, safety insurance. And also there is some concern that if DCT organisations set up, as has happened in the US, what's it going to be the effect on site workforce? And there's this fragility of workforce going on because there's so much competition arising through clinical trial organisations. So yet another element coming in. Does it mean it's going to be more fragile or stronger? I don't know. I haven't made my mind up yet. There's one quote, and this comes from one of my vice presidents in Future Meds who presented this recently at a conference. Patients don't live around research sites. They live in communities, homes, and realities where a one-size-fits-all model doesn't work. An ecosystem flexes to its environment. Clinical trials should do the same, adapting across sites, homes, and digital touchpoints under one quality system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panelists. I think something Martine said resonated with me. It was we should decentralize and not deharmonize, and I think that probably fits with also what you're trying to say, Martin, around, you know, how do we get harmonization in what we're trying to do, flexibility from the beginning built in, but at the same time making sure that we have standardization in what we're trying to deliver. So we'll open up the panel to questions, either in the audience or online. Petra's got one online. She's nodding her head. She's got 3 online.
Yes, I do. 2 questions for Monique. So Monique, pay attention, please. First question is, since COVID, have you seen a rise in trials with critical to quality decentralized elements, and how are such trials being tracked in the EU?
I couldn't hear the last part of your sentence.
And how are these trials being tracked in the EU?
Tracked in the EU. Aha, that was my answer. That's a little bit the issue currently, that we don't have a system in place where we monitor which factors, decentralized elements in a clinical trial, are the critical to quality factors. We also don't have a system where we can select clinical trials with these elements. So that's why I was so happy with your work, because that's for the most part, done in a structured way, and we can't. So it's only by exchanging experiences when you talk to your colleague assessors, or you have meetings with colleague assessors within the CTCG, or we have now a group of ethics committees from the European Union that's called MedEthics EU. But that's not really the way you want to approach it. I would certainly be interested to look into it, but I'm sorry, I can't answer your question for that reason. And it's a pity, because I think we have so much data available in CTIS. Peter, where are you? Hello. I know there are some thinking about how can we get this information from CTIS, but then you also have to think which information do you want to capture in CTIS to answer your question. So, sorry.
And the next one also for you, Monique. Can you speak a bit more about the changes to the DCT recommendation paper, please?
Okay. Okay. Well, the core text of the DCT paper has not been changed. We sent out a survey to all member states and to ask them, are there any elements in the current DCT paper, or are there any new elements which you want to address? Well, I have to say one element pops up, and I will continue on that later. From the regulators, a need for updates, and I think that really reflects a little bit to the fact that we don't see much updates of these decentralized elements than normally. Of course, there are exceptions, but so we sent out a survey to look at the national provision overview, and every member state have updated where it should be updated. There were also a lot of data missing from certain member states, but I think, I don't know by head, of course, you know we have 30 countries in the European Economic Area, so at least what I do know, the changes are primarily in the columns with the IMP shipment and delivery, and in the e-consent part. So, and towards more flexibility, just not more restrictive. What's another? Oh yeah, that point where you want to have more kindness on, and that was what do we consider a clinical trial site? And it was also a little bit driven, Martine, by cross-border trials, which pops up all the time. It was already a topic which we want to address when we drafted the recommendation paper, but it's a challenging one, so it was on the parking lot. And now we are looking into it if the car can be away from the parking lot and see if we come up with a more harmonized approach. And it was also triggered by the currently published recommendation paper from FPA and some other parties involved on the recommendations for cross-border trials. And I think that affects cross-border as well as decentralized elements. Discussions on when are you a vendor or when are you a clinical trial site is currently not very clear. And yeah, I hope this answers the question.
Thank you, Monique. Will we take one in the room? Is there any questions in the room, or another one online?
I do have another one online, and it's related to what Monique just mentioned about the cross-borders, because somebody made the reflection, thank you, Nuala, regarding Martine's story on Lucia. If this was a DCT and Spain was not involved, because there's no approval, would this involvement of Lucia still be allowed remotely?
For me, sorry. Yeah, or well, in general, I think we know the challenges with cross-border trials. I think I will not go into it, but we don't have a harmonized view yet when a trial. Well, okay, when a patient, let's say a patient from the Netherlands goes to Spain. And Spain have, of course, authorized this clinical trial, just to be clear on that. You go there, you get your treatment, you stay there for a little while for follow-up, etc. And then it's a time that is justified to go home again. You go back to your home country, but there is still some follow-up to do. And there could also be some long-term adverse events or effects or reactions. This is really now the discussion we're having within the regulatory network. What is the role of the regulatory part in this home country, in the Netherlands then? But also for the sponsor sitting there in Spain, what is the roles and responsibility from the sponsor side? And I'm not talking about insurance, because we all know that's really a challenge, but from a regulatory point of view. And this is a discussion we have just started to give some clarity. And that's the reason why we included the statement in our update, if it's about cross-border trials, to really contact your national contact point, because some member states think that the trials should also be authorized in the home country, and other member states think, well, it depends. So it's, yeah. So.
And we had some real examples of that with managing patients from Ukraine, where we could ship them maybe to, or advise them to go to Poland because it was approved there, or Romania, and we had to work around which countries had the approval in place. So.
Yeah, okay, but I know Ukraine is many times mentioned, but there is a little bit of a difference that the trial was authorized in Ukraine and as well in Poland. So, yeah. And of course there are then still challenges, but yeah.
You have one here.
Mira, you have a mic.
I have a mic, yes. So I have many questions, so if no one else is asking them, a first question for Martin. I completely agree that we need to involve sites also earlier in protocol development. We see it from both sides, sometimes as site at the UMCU, but then as a sponsor, it can be very hard, because which side do you involve in which capacity, because sites are also extremely busy. So I really would like to get your view on what do you think is the best way of doing that, and what capacity and at what time point?
Oh, at the moment, we probably only get the ICF to actually review. That's and that's sort of along with the patient review at the same time. I agree with you. It's which site should you do? Maybe if the CI is the PI, maybe they could do it. But I realise not every CI is actually an active PI doing the practical work. One of the reasons I've been trying to get a sort of a central group set up, certainly amongst the private clinical research sites. They have something in the NHS, in the NIHR, which is the National Institute of Health Research, that can do that type of work, but it's just not used. That's the problem, because most people think they have to give us the complete document. But it gets even more basic than that, because what we're seeing is, so there's a form called the IRAS form in the UK, which is the sort of the submission to the Ethics and Regulatory Board. There's often mistakes made in it, which we would pick up, but we never get sight of it until it's too late, and then that delays the trial, because it then needs to go back to the ethics board to get regulatory approval. So I think we just need to find something, even if you pick a site, you know, everybody's different. Everybody's going to give their own opinion, but I think as long as you get one or two, or you get a little consortium together, like you would do with a patient group, I think that'd be better than nothing.
Yeah, so start somewhere. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I have another one.
Do you mind if I just follow up on that one? Just because it's fascinating, and I feel like I mean, Megan and I could talk for hours about this, because we work in a large pharma company within clinical operations, and we're not always the ones designing the studies, but we're being handed the studies to execute. So my question is just a bit of a follow-on from Mira's. How do you manage? And maybe this hasn't happened, but when you are giving the feedback, and maybe not all of it can be taken, and probably some is just bad decisions being made to not take that feedback, but some may be very rooted in a scientific question, or a safety concern, or something that the medical lead feels really needs to be in the protocol. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you manage that sort of taking the advice versus not taking the advice, or maybe it's a mix.
I think the bit that we would like to get involved in, because I don't think, we don't want to tell you how to make drugs, right? That's the sponsors' jobs. But the bit where we can help is the operational delivery of the clinical trial. So is the schedule reasonable? You know, a lot of the things actually that the participants will look at, but we'll just look at it from a different way. You know, to have somebody sat in the clinical trials centre for 12 hours, maybe, is the schedule reasonable for that number of tests? It's that sort of thing, or they get the drugs wrong about the drugs that are available in terms of medications, for example, within an individual country. So I think it's the practical advice that we could have, but we don't want to get involved. Most of us wouldn't want to get involved in the pure science of it, I don't think.
I think we are there in the back first, and then here in the front.
Thanks very much. I thought those were really interesting. Lots of things to think about in those 4 presentations. Well, I got a question for I've forgotten. So the last, David. Martin, sorry, I don't know.
David was my dad, so you're nearly there.
Well, if you want to ask your dad, that's fine. And also one from Maria. I was struck by the quote that you finished with, and also the sort of shopping example about the on-site thing. And I wondered if you could just sort of say something a little bit more about how we might choose between when to decentralise and when not to, and when to have some kind of mixture. I mean, my instant response is that we should do what's most efficient to generate the knowledge that we need, and that might mean not decentralising sometimes. But it's not really informed by the provision of the ability to do shopping en route. So that was the sort of that was my question to you. I think, Maria, I just wanted to go back to your last question. I think it's really important that the people in the room think about that question. That is, how do we assess the impact of patient involvement? And I guess I've tried to think about this a little bit. And one of the things that seems to me, if we're taking a sort of scientific approach to evidence generation here, is we need to start by thinking it's not useful. So we need to have the radical thought that involving patients isn't useful until we can prove that it is. And so we run maybe a randomised control trial where we have one study that doesn't involve patients and another one that does. And that's how we're going to generate the evidence that it works. I mean, I'm with you. I think that there's going to be lots of cases where I think it's really impactful, but there might be some others where it's not very impactful. And the way in which we tease that out is by doing some of these systematic studies. Sorry, thank you both.
Go first.
So I'm not sure if there's a question there. I think I agree with you.
Good.
Yeah.
That was easy. I'll go next then. I think, going back to your question, I think it is almost using my shopping analogy in a different way. It's a pick and mix shopping, isn't it? There's so many different reasons why you might select a site versus a different environment. Because it might not be the home, it could be a local clinic to them. I've done a lot of Alzheimer's research in my career, and you often find that those trials are slowly getting actually a home element in it built in, because some of these patients, when they're on double blind, obviously their Alzheimer's may progress and they find it more and more difficult, particularly for their study partner. But not every sponsor company looks at it like that. And there was one, shall we say, very big sponsor company that I recently had a discussion with because they wouldn't allow actual home nursing teams to go in and give this medication. And when I asked why, they said, oh, because we can't get blood tests and safety done at home. Oh, well, why did that sponsor allow it and that sponsor allow it and that sponsor allow it? So I think unfortunately, the sponsors you know, they pay the money and they also make the regulations to a certain degree, or how they interpret the regulations and the design of the trial. So I think there needs to be a consensus going on, and maybe what actually that picking list is.
Thank you. I think Kate in the, yeah.
Thank you. So I have it's a bit of a specific question about CETUS. So I don't know if everybody knows what CETUS is, but you probably do, but just in case, it's the European database for submission of studies by sponsors and then the review of and approval of by ethics committees and agencies. So it's a big resource of information. And I was interested to hear more about the ideas that you might have been discussing about tracking decentralized elements in studies, but also I think an important question from that is, how do you think that would then be utilized, or how would that then be useful?
Well, for several reasons. First of all, by tracking, we become more aware of how many times decentralized elements are being used. And that might be not the correct wording, because we all know that in many trials there are decentralized elements, but of course it's about the elements which we consider critical. And we really don't know. So that's interesting, of course, to know. And the other part is that we could, if we know what, we could also look into how is it being assessed by the different member states, by the NCA, by ethics, see if there are any differences which could contribute to more harmonization if needed. I mean, harmonization is not a goal on its own. There could be justified reasons why there could be differences, but it's interesting to know. And as part of that, I think it's also, you could also look into what kind of information is provided by the sponsor in their application, if they have those critical decentralized elements included in the protocol. I think it's also very important that you show as a sponsor why you have chosen to include them, that you have done a risk analysis, see what are the risks, and if there are any risks, how did you mitigate them? And it will also really be helpful in respect to the assessment, and these kind of things could also contribute to a more harmonized approach in assessing clinical trials with decentralized elements, and also cross-border. I think there is a strong relationship between the two of them. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really agree, actually. I think understanding the value and the rationale of why people are why we're choosing to do this, and also if it can help drive the harmonization aspect of it as well, that would be extraordinarily helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and maybe something to add, that there are more aspects which we like to track. We try to, well, we just finished the recommendation paper. Of course, we said, oh, how to continue? Oh, we should track. So we made a nice Excel on a platform with a login. So, but that didn't work, of course. Nobody thinks on the end of the working day, oh, let's go to this Excel file and put in the information about the decentralized element. So to approach it in a different way, we have, at CTCG, we have made an update of our assessment report, because in our assessment report, if you are a sponsor, you have seen probably one of those assessment reports, completed ones, and we make additional items in it. One is about decentralized elements. Another thing is about patient involvement into the design of the clinical trial, which we also really like to track. We're just waiting for this template to be uploaded as a standard DAR in CTIS. So, yeah. And maybe then it would also be easier to track and do the analysis, which we really like to do.
Maybe just a small addition because of this question. From an academic perspective, there's a wealth of information through the regulatory websites on what they track and what they share. And we academics, we really love that stuff. You know, we extract and we stratify and we think about what kind of systems changes lead to certain things that we see. And we actually publish that, and that is sometimes useful when you need to start a conversation on, you know, where you want to go. Just wanted to add that from our side, we're very happy with what's ongoing in sharing that information.
So we've got 2 minutes. Are there any last burning questions? And are there any others, or we let Mira take
so
the
quick.
last one? Are we done online? We're okay online? You have one online?
Oh, go for the online.
Hi, this is a question for Martin. Could you kindly expand more on recruitment challenges and diversity? What were the issues encountered by participants or trial managers with recruitment? And were some challenges more common to specific participant groups?
Two separate things, really. I think my bit about the diversity was relating to more about retention in clinical trials and the socioeconomic issues that we see, particularly in certain parts of the UK, where people just can't take a day off work to come for clinical trials because of lack of stipends being put into submissions. And it's amazing how ignorant people can be generally about saying that, well, it's unethical to actually pay anybody to do it. No, it's certainly, I don't know about all the regulations within Europe. There are certain parts of the world where it is, they don't like it, like in Japan, for example. But certainly from a UK perspective, the HRA encourage us to compensate patients for their time and it's proportional. And the bit about recruitment was very much directed at the diabetic issue with insulin, because patients, once they get established on insulin, don't like to change it, particularly without the permission from either their specialist or their diabetic liaison nurse. And that wasn't taken into account from what I understand. I think people thought they would just change it. But of course, it wasn't the primary outcome for this study at all. You know, it's the DCT elements that were the primary outcome.
Yes, thank you. I just got the idea, so you can ask 2 questions in one, so I'm going to do that as well quickly. So I had a question for Martina and I had a question for Maria still. So we just heard, and we also shared some examples of how moving from thinking about decentralization to actually doing it in practice, that the devil is in the detail, right? So how do you do that in the different countries in Europe? Think about DTP, think about moving things around, think about doing a home blood sample and then making sure it reaches the lab. And I think CROs are the experts in how can we do this, right? So where do you see a big gain that we can still make in more efficient operation of some of these DCT elements? And what I wanted to ask Maria, we already touched upon it quickly yesterday. I think you're doing an amazing job with the training of participants to be real spokesperson in these conversations. We were talking about we also need to educate the general public on why do we do clinical research and why is that needed? And I was wondering whether you think, and that's broader for clinical trials in general, whether you, Patty, could play a role there.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I respond to your first question. To be more efficient, try to use less vendors, not too many vendors on a trial, the less possible. And if we would have more guidance, so if it's harmonized across Europe, that would facilitate it, but to reduce the number of vendors, to not have too many kitchen in the too many cooks in the kitchen, that would really be very helpful. Yeah. And harmonization would be the second helpful. So.
Thank you. I will answer your question by also sending a little message from a previous IMI project that became independent. And I know this is your closing conference, but I really would love to see this movement continue. And what you have created here is something really unique. And we see now the training is available there, and it's going to be disseminated through many organizations, I know. So it will be also come to the hands of citizens. So we are going beyond the patient communities. And I hope my governance will agree that I also, and your party, are committed to involve citizens and general public in creating that trust in scientific research, which will then improve clinical trials, recruitment. And I think while patient organizations and patient communities have a key role in building that trust, as these are communities who know the people, and also it speaks to the challenge we still have in inclusiveness of different populations, different underserved and underrepresented populations. I was glad to also hear that comment earlier today. So there is a lot of work to do. So I'd love to see Trials at Home to continue and be sustainable and join the IMI Sustainable Project family, and that we could work together on this huge challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if we sum up, I've got one thing that comes to my mind, and that is start somewhere. Start with dialogue with regulators and ethics committees. We did move the needle in Trials at Home in doing that. We started with patient engagement in all sorts of areas that we hadn't been before, and we saw some benefits for that, and we'll think very carefully about how to measure it. And we have had some site round tables, and we absolutely should learn to do that a little bit more robustly. But I have on my office wall at home, and I'm going to read it. It's a verse from a poem. It says, "It cannot be done." It's by Edgar Albert Guest. There are thousands of people to tell you it cannot be done. There are thousands to prophesy failure. There are thousands to point out to you, one by one, the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle right in and give it a grin. Just take off your coat and get on it. Just start in a song as you tackle the thing that cannot be done, and you'll do it. So thank you to our panel, and thank you to everybody.